Today, in this very exciting session this morning, we're going to entice you to explore this world full of opportunities and to look at it from three different but close-knit angles. Now, the perspective of a global technology powerhouse, which is Siemens, then the perspective of one of the world's largest investor-owned electric utility service providers, namely E.ON, and finally, Gestamp, an international top manufacturer of automotive components. And starting it off, I'd like to welcome, with a big round of applause, member of the managing board of Siemens AG. Please welcome Cedric Neike. Welcome.
Wow. Welcome to the Siemens stand. And it's news the first time I've been at the Hanover Fair. It's my third week in the role as managing board, and I have Carsten and Pablo joining me. And the interesting part, we're going to talk about energy. I think Carsten is from the telco industry and Pablo is an IT specialist, so we're absolutely qualified. And I worked 17 years at Cisco before to talk to you about energy. But we will do this because it's probably my responsibility as a managing board member is the energy management, and it's probably the most exciting sector which is going on at the moment. So we're going to take you through it. We're going to go quickly on presenting us the elements, and then we're going to go to the Q&A. Now, what's interesting to understand, and I said that this industry is in complete disruption, and it's important to understand that I joined 3 weeks ago, and I came from the telco industry. And what you have to understand in the telco industry, my world was 17 years ago, you had the internet, which took data, which was centralized and decentralized it. You had mobile phones with smartphone, which decentralized this data even more. And Industry 4.0 and Internet of Things has really sort of put it out. So you really had something which was centralized, decentralized massively, and changing complete industries. Now, if I look at the energy industry also at the same time, same thing, very centralized. You had coal plants, you had classical oil plants. We went to even more centralization if we go forward with nuclear. We went to gas, but then solar came, wind came, decentralized energy system came. So the two things is, if you look at Germany, in the 90s, we had 1,000 power plants, 1,000 power plants for Germany. We now have 1.5 million prosumers which produce and consume energy at the same time. So within 20 years, the energy market has completely changed. So if you look at the IT world, which completely changed, if you look at the energy world, which completely changed, the big question we're going to try to answer today, what does it mean for all of you? What does it mean for the industry? What does it mean for DSOs? What does it mean for TSOs? Because the reality is we're going to produce so much data with this decentralization, and we need to react on it, that we need to find the answers. And trust me, from the telco industry, I learned that if you do not go proactively into such a disruption, you're going to be disrupted yourself. Now, what does it mean? Is that the essence of how we look at energy is not to make sure that it just produces something or that you have access to it. It's going to be a source of data. It's going to be absolutely a source of data. If you look at Michael Dell, he says the oil or the energy of the 21st century is going to be data itself. If we look at the energy sector, data is going to be the key asset to take this super complexity which we generate with having 1.5 million which start producing and consuming energy and rebuilding it back together. So decentralization creates complexity, and data will bring it back together to be able to sort of put it forward. So that's an important sort of aspect of things. And if I look at all of you, there's three types of customers we have. We have the traditional TSOs, the transportation system operator. You have the DSOs, and you have the industry, everybody which is here at the moment. The three problems we have are very different. If you're a TSO, and now you basically have to make sure that with all the wind energy, with all the solar energy, you produce at an absolute stable level this capacity. That's the main thing. Stability is really what you're going for. If you're a DSO, and Carsten is going to come up and talk about it, if you're a DSO, you have a different issue. You have an issue that all of your consumers are also producers, and you need to connect with them. You need to create transparency. So the first one is really about stability. The second one is about transparency. If you're an industry, you have a different issue. You want reliability. You now have access to a lot of energy sources. The prices, if you're in Europe, are much higher than if you're in the US or if you're in Asia. You need to be able to take energy as something you can sort of compete with. So what has happened? You have an industry which was centralized, which got completely decentralized. You have the capability to bring it back together using the data you have to solve very different problems. To either solve the problems of stability, to either solve the problem of transparency, or either solve the problems of competitiveness. And we at Siemens, and we talked about it, and just for you to start sort of thinking about it, the first thing we've done is, in my industry, in my old industry, it was called software-defined networking. The idea is that software and hardware in the energy industry is still combined. In the reality, it's going to be sort of separated. In the reality, what we're doing, we're working with the University of Marburg in Ilmenau to really connect the two and build really what we call the grid control center of the future. So you take the brain, and instead of having sort of a central distribution, you dynamically understand what are the changes, what are the wind changes, what is the solar change, what is the production changes, and dynamically sort of start configuring this transmission systems to be much more dynamic than it used to be. So you're making out of an energy system which was centralized and sort of planned with a couple of very good mathematicians to a super dynamic environment where you build a brain which constantly controls it. So that's the first change you have. The second change, and I'm not going to talk for Carsten into more details, is the idea that I now have these millions of users, and I think there's even a necessity to over, I think, 6,000 kilowatts to be able to produce, to be able to meter, is how do I build transparency? And we're working together with E.ON to build, using the MindSphere product or the Energy IP product, to understand each one of those productions and be able to build transparency into the system. So I said the first problem you have is you need to have stability. We do it by putting a brain and dynamically adapt it. The second one is transparency. We work with E.ON to put as much as possible understanding of the different networks and building them back together. The third element is, if you are an industry, the main issue you have is to say, how do I have access to reliable energy? How do I have access to cheap energy? How do I have access to these sort of, in a decentralized, should I even become a producer of my own energy? I don't know, and Pablo needs to answer that question. And what we've done is to say, okay, if we could give you the brains to understand on how to optimize your energy production, you can do all of those things. So we work together with Gestamp, and I think, Pablo, you're going to talk about it, on a cloud-based energy system where we basically connected the 14 plants of Gestamp, which is basically really big press. They're basically forming metal, taking the data and optimizing it so that they saved 15% sort of energy cost. But they're going to do much more, and I'm not going to take the line from Pablo here. So you have to understand, the world's become more complex. We have to live with that. We take IT systems to bring this intelligence back together to do three things. One, to make sure that we are safe, that we can build sort of the capability to transport this energy safe. We make sure that every prosumer has access to this information, and we make sure that the stability and the intelligence is there to actually save money for the industry. So how do we do this? This is our view of the world. In order to do this, you will have to connect every element of this chain, what we call digital and enhanced automation, either with new products or doing sort of backwards compatibility. All the network elements which didn't used to talk, all the transformers, all the elements of the energy chain now need to basically say, this is who I am, this is what I see, this is what I can do. So you make this energy systems communicate to you. The same way we have in other rooms, the same ways we make each robot, each industrial environment talk. The same way we do that every sort of city starts to have the capability to do it. We produce data, so that's the first thing. The second element we do is we build basically what we call an operating system. So the capability to take this data and share it across multiple environments so that we can build outcomes or application on top of it. And the idea of MindSphere is that we as Siemens will help you make those devices intelligent which you have, to build this operating system to be able to connect them with each other, and then build application around it. So you can start, and the idea, and that's the big advantage is, you could start, for example, in Gestamp, to understand where's my energy consumption coming from. You can then link it with an outlook saying energy will be very cheap because there's going to be a lot of sun in Spain at the moment, and you can then sort of optimize the production facility, which is in the production environment, to really take this cost advantage. So you start having each one of the elements talk to each other. The fundamental value of a network is how many elements are added to this network. The more elements we add to the network, the more value we can create. And that's really sort of where we need to sort of go and where we need to understand on where the world goes. The world of digitalization and the world of energy are coming together because this huge decentralization, this huge amount of energy produces the necessity for us to work on this. But it also creates opportunity when we start linking it to other parts of the world. And that's the one key thing I want to tell you is that I could tell you, all right, this energy world is changing, renewable energy is important, but what I'm trying to tell you is we need to build and take all of the capabilities we have in digitization to understand and optimize it for your problem. Saving power, being more secure, trying to have transparency. But this will give you an additional advantage because it gives you the possibility to understand your network and start looking at your energy network not as a cost center, but as a value creation. A value creation in the case of E.ON for your customers, for your consumers, in the case when you're in industry for your IT systems, and really go forward. So the discussion and the Q&A we're going to have is to take your mind and say it's not about only how do we get you the best transformer and how do we get you the best control system, but how do we put intelligence into your network, build a brain to connect it, and really connect it across multiple industries to add and create value. Because as I said, the oil of the new generation or the oil of this generation will be the data we create, and energy is the best and the key capability to sort of enable this. So without further ado, to make it even more real, I want to make sure that I invite Carsten up to the stage. Just for you, Carsten and I actually studied together 20 years ago at the same university. We didn't know, since I'm only 3 weeks, he's a year in E.ON. He came out of the telecom industry, and he will also tell you what is this link, which is between the energy and the telecom industry, which actually comes together. Thank you, and help me welcome Carsten, absolutely. Thank you.